first I say to my boss, what do you need written today? And then she says, I need you to write this. And I go, okay. And half of comedy writing for me is just kind of whatever pops into my head. Luckily, I've been doing it for a long time now. And it was always something that I liked doing. So sometimes jokes will just come into my head whenever I need them to. And those are the best moments, but that doesn't happen that much. The other section of the time is sitting and trying to think through what is the joke that works for this thing that I'm writing, whether it's like a joke for a comedian to say or for a character to say in a scene. And a lot of thinking about what am I trying to say with this joke and what's the right shape for it, and then how do I make it funny in a surprising way. And I have created for myself a series of steps that I can go through to write jokes when they don't just pop into my head, and it's as helpful as it is boring to talk about. So I find it as useful when writing comedy as it is not exciting to hear me describe.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
My favorite bad movie is, well, that's a good question. It's my new favorite bad movie is probably the movie Cats, which came out a couple years ago based on the musical. And it's one of those movies where you're watching it and you're like, so many people put so much work into this and they're trying as hard as they can. And they're making the wrong creative decision almost every single time. Every single time they have a choice between doing something that will work and doing something that won't work, they do the thing that won't work. And so the whole time you're watching the movie, you're like, it's like a dream you're in. You're like, I can't believe this is real. I can't believe this is a real movie that happened. But the bad movie that has haunted me the most through my life is a movie called Nuki, which is a ripoff of E.T., where these two alien brothers crash land on Earth, and it's really depressing to watch. And the alien costumes look like big piles of dirt, and for some reason they decided that one of the aliens should always be sad and his nose should always be running, so his face is always wet with boogers, and it's a horrible movie. So don't watch that. But Cats is like watching a nightmare someone had, where you're like, I can't believe that this is a movie I'm seeing in front of me right now. I think I had some of my favorite memories were meeting guests that were really exciting to meet. I met the writer Kurt Vonnegut when he was a guest on the show, and he's been one of my favorite novelists for a long time. And another writer named Robert Caro, who wrote this book, The Power Broker, which is my favorite nonfiction book. And the legendary actor Peter O'Toole, I got to see him once in person when he was a guest. But I think my favorite memory of being a writer there might be, I was working with another writer there named Hallie Hagland, and we were writing a story about the moon. I think China had sent a satellite to the moon or something like that. And we were working on the second draft, and it was about 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And I said, what if we just wrote Neil deGrasse Tyson into this? Like, and like, what if we just had him walk on and then say something to John, because the host at the time was Jon Stewart. Yeah. What if we had just had him walk on and say something to John and then walk off again? And Hallie was like, can we do that? And I was like, let's try it. I don't know. And so we wrote in this joke, and then 2.5 hours later, Neil deGrasse Tyson is there for rehearsal, because they called him up and said, we have this joke for you. Do you want to do it? And he said, yes. And it felt like magic. It felt like we had kind of written him into existence, like a, conjuring a genie, that we had cast a spell with this joke and Neil deGrasse Tyson appeared. And that was just very exciting. The feeling of with this joke, we made a famous person show up, and that we didn't expect to ever see here. Yeah. Deepest, darkest secret is, that's a good question. My life is a fairly open book. I don't know, doing a podcast for many, many years, you kind of end up talking about everything that's going on in your life and letting people in on things. I think I don't know. My deepest, darkest secret is that maybe that it really bothers me that I don't think anyone's ever going to write a biography about me. Like, I go into the bookstore and I see all these biographies for like George Washington and Albert Einstein and Joan of Arc and people like that. And I know there's not going to be an Elliott Kalan book on the shelf. That really bothers me in a way that it shouldn't, because people don't get biographies like that written about them until they're dead anyway. So they don't know, but it really bothers me, I think. Actually, talking about that, for some reason, that made me think of another Daily Show memory that your readers might find funny. I don't know, where when Barack Obama was running for president, he came on the show as a guest. He appeared on the show as a guest, and he was shaking people's hands. And there was when I was at that time, my habit was always to eat Doritos at a certain point of the day at the Daily Show. And he was going down this line of people shaking their hands. And I was standing there eating Doritos, thinking, I shouldn't be eating these Doritos right now. This is a bad idea. And when Barack Obama got to me, he put out his hand to shake my hand. And I said, I can't shake your hand. I have Dorito dust all over my hand. And so he gave me a fist bump instead. And that was one of my favorite moments there. I was really impressed at how quickly he thought. He said, oh, okay, how about one of these? And he gave me a fist bump instead. But I felt like such a fool for just standing there eating Doritos while the United States Senator running for president was shaking people's hands.
Yeah.
Being on Jeopardy was very exciting because it's a show I've been watching since I was a kid. And I used to watch it with my dad, and I would be amazed at how he knew all the answers. And now I watch it with my son, and he's always amazed at that I know the answers. But when I was on it, I was practicing, and they kept delaying when I was going to be a contestant because of COVID. And then the host, Alex Trebek, died. And so for months and months and months, I was practicing. And the one thing that I didn't practice enough of was pressing the buzzer button fast enough. And when I finally got on it, one of the other contestants, he was just so fast with the buzzer and I couldn't compete with him. And by the end of it, I felt really disappointed. And I was like, ugh, everyone's going to be so disappointed in me that I didn't win. But then when the show came out and people saw it, everyone was just excited that I was on it. So nobody really cared that I had won or lost. And that was a nice feeling, that people were just excited that I was there and they didn't care if I actually won or not. But there were a lot of questions on that episode that I wish I had gotten, but I didn't buzz in fast enough. Very disappointing, but it was still fun. My favorite riff that I wrote for Mystery Science Theater is there's an episode of a movie called The Time Travelers. And at the very end of it, these time travelers end up in this beautiful future that's full of ponies and a beautiful forest. And I wrote a joke that was a reference to the jingle from a commercial for a local resort from when I was a kid growing up in New Jersey. There used to be a resort called Mount Airy Lodge, and they had on the commercial it said, all you have to bring is your love of everything, beautiful Mount Airy Lodge. And so I wrote a joke where it was just that, but beautiful time travelers lodge. And everyone else on the show is not from New Jersey. They're either from Pennsylvania or California. And they were very mad. And they said, we're not going to do that joke. No one's going to get it. And I fought really hard for it. And I said, no, we're doing this joke. It's going to happen just for me. It's for me and my brother. That's it. And finally we did it. And when the episode aired, a lot of people were like, I can't believe there was a joke about that commercial from when I was a kid. And that made me very, very happy. So that's my favorite one I wrote, because I had to fight really hard for it.
Yeah.
It's a good question. New York I know the New York scene better, if only because I was in the New York comedy scene when I was a young man, and I could go out at night and perform stand-up or go to stand-up shows or go to sketch shows or improv shows. And now I'm in Los Angeles as a middle-aged man who has children and can't go out to see comedy that much. But it feels like the New York scene is, I don't know, it feels like it's more exciting in some ways. And there's less of a sense of I'm doing this so that I can get a job where I have a TV show. And I think in LA, there's lots of people doing stand-up just because they want to do stand-up. But it feels like in New York, the people who really, really want to do stand-up just because they want to do it, that New York has a lot of that. And the same with improv and sketch comedy. It just feels like there's so much going on there, but it might just be that I am an old man who no longer goes out to comedy shows as much. Los Angeles might have a huge amount of it, but it feels like in New York, everything's just kind of like scrappier, scrappier and hungrier. And in LA, it's a lot more, I'm doing this and then I'll get a job and I'll stop doing it, Minor historic event. So I can't save Abraham Lincoln because that's the thing I've always wanted to do. Okay. Because that's pretty major. If I could change one minor historic event, okay, so when Chester A. Arthur was president, he had a pen pal, this woman he had never met in person named Julia Sand, who just started writing to him and giving him advice. And he became a better president because she was giving him this advice. And she was not known, and nobody knew about her doing this until many years after Chester Arthur had died. And she died in obscurity in the 1930s, and she's buried in a cemetery in Brooklyn, in Greenwood Cemetery, and she doesn't even have her own headstone. She's just in her family plot. And I think I would tell the newspapers about her so that she got some credit while she was still alive. That's what I would do. She's someone who she's just one of these regular people who decides to make her voice heard and does change history, but nobody knew about it at the time. So I'd want her to get a little bit of credit. That's what I do. That's the minor thing I would change. Okay. There's no president more minor than Chester A. Arthur when it comes down to it. I mean, I find he's a very interesting president when you learn about him, but he's not one of the big ones.
Yeah, that's super.
That was amazing. So if there's two important people to me that I look to as examples for how to live, it's Abraham Lincoln and SpiderMan. And so I know that Spider-Man's not real, but he's kind of real. And I've been a huge Spider-Man fan since I was a kid. And to get the chance to write him and to write kind of my version of him, that to put my kind of jokes in his mouth, and to have him interacting with the X-Men, who are characters that I love also, it was just really, really exciting. And I wrote, it was a 6-issue series, and I tried to cram as many characters and as much story into that 6 issues as I possibly could. And there were still stories about Spider-Man that I wanted to tell that I didn't get to, that I couldn't fit in. It was one of the most exciting things. I feel like I've been very lucky that in my career as a writer, all these things that I loved when I was younger, I've been able to be a part of and write for. Like, I was a huge fan of The Daily Show, and I got to write for that. And Mystery Science Theater was my favorite show, and I got to write for that. And Spider-Man, I got to write those comics for. So I feel very lucky that I've been able to kind of go down the list of things that I'm excited in and excited about, and be a part of those. And that's what that was like for me. The original X-Men run, my older son and I have been reading through that, and it's been exciting to share that with him and to see him really enjoying them. We just read up through, we started with issue 1, and we've read up through we're like at issue 121 or something like that. And we read the story with, I don't know if you read the storyline with the first one with Arcade, where Arcade kidnaps the X-Men and is putting them through these death traps. And my son loves games, so he's like, this is a great character. I love this character. He's all about games. This is fantastic. The other thing I should say about that Spider-Man book is there's one panel in that series where Spider-Man is talking to the villain Sauron, who's a Pteranodon man. And Spider-Man's saying, with the technology you have, you could cure cancer, but you're turning people into dinosaurs. And Sauron says, I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs. And that one panel has taken on a life of its own on Twitter and on the internet. And that was really exciting to see a joke that I wrote for that book become something that people use, like, just matter-of-factly to talk about when someone's priorities are mixed up, or basically when a rich person is doing something selfish instead of helping people. And I think probably when I die, like, that panel will be on my tombstone, and people will be like, oh, he's the guy who did that. Yeah, I know what that is.
Yeah.
See, I want to try to think of the corniest joke I can tell about Airline Food. Oh man. I'll tell you what I like about Airline Food. What I like about Airline Food is that when they give you a meal, first, it comes with steamed plastic on top of it, which is great. Nothing makes food more delicious than seeing it underneath steamy plastic. Secondly, everything comes in its own package, which is fantastic because it's like you're getting 6 different presents for your lunch birthday. And even though the presents are not very good, because they don't taste very good, opening them is the most fun part. So I just love going through each of the, like, I'll open up the butter packet. I'll open up, there's usually like a little cup with a foil on top of it of orange juice. I'm not going to drink that, but I'll open it up. I'll open up like whatever dessert comes with it. I just like the act of opening it. And if I eat 1 spoonful of whatever the mush is that the food is, that's a win. But really the exciting thing is opening it. So I think it's good. It's like getting a lot of little presents from a relative who doesn't really know what you like, but got you something. So that's the thought that counts. So thank you, airlines, for all those little gifts.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Thank you so much for doing the interview.
No problem. Thank you. If any other questions come up, feel free to
Yeah.
email me. I'd be happy to follow up on anything.